Hello, welcome to Quackalope. Thank you for being here. I'm here in Manchester at Steamforge Games headquarters, getting a chance to dive into, well, Elden Ring, the board game. A little-known IP, nothing that you've probably heard of before, but I'm here with Russ. You're the lead designer and art director here at Steamforge Games.
I am indeed, yes, that's correct.
And we wanted to have a conversation around how you bring something like a video game IP, which has about a dozen cooks in the kitchen, to life into a miniatures form, from the design choices that come when you're deciding how to actually pose a model, when you usually see it as a flowing animated corpse in front of the screen,
Sure.
All the way down to like some of your tattered here that are something that the actual fans get to control themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a process, and it's something that we've been refining over a number of years. From my very first experience of doing this was on our original Dark Souls project.
Okay.
And
You said insider information from a conversation with you. You said you did every sculpt
in the
for
core game.
the core game of
Yeah.
Dark, which seems irresponsible.
It was wild, and I think I only agreed to do it because I had no idea the scope of what I was taking on.
Okay.
That said, going from that project to this project, where you're working with an IP in a similar world, you're working with the same partners, and you're working with the same publishing teams. I think that it's really useful to see how far we've progressed in terms of being able to interpret a game's sort of raw emotional and like iconic visual imagery into miniature form, and understanding that process and the decisions behind it. Like, I'm really proud of the work that the team has done on this, and I think it would not be an exaggeration to say I think this is probably both the most challenging project that we've ever taken on, and I think our sort of greatest achievement as a miniatures team. I'm super happy with the results.
So let's start talking about Elden
Sure.
Ring. Let's start talking about what's happening here when you actually start bringing a IP to life.
Yeah.
What are some of the... Because I'm ignorant to this, right? I get beautiful minis in front of me. I sometimes paint them, although way less than I should, responsibly for the amount I own. And I love setting them down on the table. Like, I'm one of those that just, I want the cool sculpts. I want the cool minis. I want to have a glass cabinet full of them. But I don't really know, the A's through Z's that go into the actual creation of this. So walk me through the story.
Okay, so there's a lot of decision making that you're going to make, because you recognize you're going in, as you mentioned, you're taking a purely visual animated experience, and you're turning it into a highly tactile experience. You're going to interact with these models on quite an intimate level. You're going to be handling them. If you're painting them, you're going to be looking at them for hours.
I've seen a lot of people in the video game itself have discovered a variety of secrets just by freeze framing the models in the video game. And so the amount of detail that gets placed into the digital adaptations of these that you're not even supposed to notice. And now here you have something that you can grip and look and twist, right?
So that's one of the starting points. You're making decisions right from day one about like what scale are we going to do these at? How do we convey the difference in size between the tarnished and the vast creatures that they're going to be fighting? What's practical? So once all of those sort of very technical decisions are settled, we're then into looking character by character and identifying the sort of emotional core of your reaction to that character, and expressing them on the table in terms of a personality and in terms of a visual presence. So we've got to do that in a way that is respectful of and reflective of the world that we're representing, and also meets like the very high quality bar that is set by FromSoft.
What's the conversation like between FromSoft and you here at Steamforge? Like, how much control do you all have over the characters that you're interpreting, right? Because it is an artistic expression. Like,
Absolutely.
Model crafting is, but you're touching into a medium that's already been expressed artistically. So what's that like?
It's really good, and we've always been fortunate with the people that we work with in terms of our sort of creative relationship, and working with FromSoft is no different. I mean, even though neither I nor anyone on my team speaks Japanese, and all of our counterparts at FromSoft, nobody speaks English, like through a visual dialogue that we've established, and the incredibly hard work of our friends at Bandai Japan, we've got a really good sort of creative dialogue. So let's take, I'm going to use Margit as an example.
Yeah.
He is, after all, one of the poster boys for the game. He's a great example of one of the first sets of creative decisions that we are making, wherein we have a discussion about, are we going to choose a pose that is specific for the miniature? Are we going to choose a pose that is a sort of iconic pose that is representative of how people will have seen it in the game? Now, Margit here is very much the most iconic classic pose that's like a sort of framed from his cutscene opening. This is exactly
how you as a video game player experience this character, right?
So that's decision point number one.
Just as lopsided and as imposing as possible.
And we are very fortunate that we are provided an awful lot of reference material by FromSoft. So we've got they're providing us with model shots from their internal model viewers that, we can control things like the lighting and the shading, and we can request zoom ins on specific parts of a model to a degree that you would never be able to do with the in-game engine. So we've got a lot of visual reference, and we've got from there a process wherein we can create the miniature, and then at that stage, once we're into the creation process and we've identified what we consider to be the key sort of beats. So again, using Margit, it's about proportion and silhouette. Getting those is really important.
Was there any other pose you'd ever explored here? Was really this was the iconic?
This was the iconic pose. The pose we briefly debated considering is one of his sort of very wide, sort of almost like spinning on the spot poses where he's going wide with the staff swing. But one of the things that we noted when we sort of freeze framed our way through the fight sequences that we were looking at was that because of all of the really nicely done cloth dynamics, what you lose, you gain a lot of energy and momentum in the model, but you lose a clean silhouette. And one of the considerations for anything that we're doing is the game isn't going to be played from a single perspective like it would be as a video game. Sure. 4 people sitting around a table have each got a different view, and they may be sitting at 4 sort of cardinal points. So they're seeing that model from 4 quadrants.
So you want to design a model that has a profile that translates, which I think this one might actually be one of the most compelling silhouettes in the game.
Absolutely.
Even from behind here, I'm looking over the lip and seeing this massive beast just swirling around.
He's huge. So he's a great example of stepping... Oh, sorry, Margit. Sorry, buddy.
Just Resin, don't worry about it.
Stepping away from Margit for a second. So Godric is is the polar opposite, really, where we had lots of opportunity because there isn't one single iconic pose when he's in this form, and also it's a 2-phase fight. So first decision is which version of him are we going to make. Then once we've made this decision to do the iconic phase 2 stage,
where he's in perpetual motion.
Yes.
I mean, you don't rest until you've defeated him.
You don't. And so, job 1: find a silhouette that works from lots of angles, which we've worked towards doing, and I think our sculptor on this was Lua, and she did an amazing job on this piece. But the technical challenge here then is we are dealing with a very asymmetrical model. It's very side heavy.
Yep.
We are then having to think about things like, when this is made in as a miniature, will it support its own weight? Is there going to be issues with it bending? So suddenly we've got these technical, quite prosaic problems that we've got to solve, and then you've got so this fabric strip down the back is hanging down. It's a very natural piece that would do that in the game, but it's also acting as a sort of strengthening support. So we're actually trying to solve engineering problems at the same time we're solving artistic problems. And then you're also having to interpret what level of detail is appropriate, because there's an amazing amount of detail in the game. And so we've brought across what we think are the iconic big beats, like the detail on the dragon's face, the feathers, all of the beautiful patterning on the robes that sort of evokes the opulence of his regal robes, like hitting all of those beats and making all of those choices to nail down that model.
Yeah, is Resin a good example for the balance of a model? Or when it actually transfers into the actual plastic production, do you find that you have to actually scale differently?
So when you translate...
Resin's a little heavier.
It is a little heavier, but it's also got more... So it's also more brittle, but it has more sort of strength within it. Like this is going to be stronger, if not more brittle in resin than it would be in a plastic. So there are stages beyond this. What we're seeing now are optimized models for capturing that look. We still have what we would call is an engineering phase. So there are still modifications that we will make to arrive at the most playable version that's going to stand up to being used as a piece on a table. It can't just work as a display piece. It's got a physical purpose. So there are changes that we will make to reach that stage. But along the way, that is the same process of what can we adapt, what can we change that doesn't ever compromise the pure vision of what makes that character iconic and makes it instantly recognizable.
Have you ran into any, with these sculpts or any other sculpts you have where you'd produce something and had left off bits or pieces that you then got a response back that was like, no, that piece needs to be there. That weapon, that armor, that shield, whatever that little bit was.
There have been lots of feedback like that. That is actually probably the most common feedback point that we get is
like that necklace really matters.
Yeah, we're making decisions all the time about it's an editing process. What can we leave out? What should we put in? What should we emphasize? And we have a view on it. FromSoft have a view on it, and that's where that dialogue is so effective.
Are there any that you remember in terms of standout things where it was interesting that something was pointed out? Or
there was on so the Tarnished are a great example because they all had to have poses that were chosen to express a character, and the model I'm thinking of isn't here, but one of the Tarnished. We did a pose that we were really happy with, and we sent it through, and the feedback came was, can we try this alternative pose? Very, very different pose for this model. So we did both versions and then sent them both back, and after review, the decision was taken to go with our original one. They were like, having seen both paths, we're happy with the decision that was made. So that was one where it was like we did an entire alternate version only to come back to where we were. And sometimes that's necessary just to sort of validate that you've made the right decision. Yeah. And I can think of a couple of times where it was like, let's add this specific element. And we've put it in. I think the Beastman of Farum Azula, there's a detailing, and again, you would not necessarily pick this up just looking at the model.
That's why I'm talking to you.
But there's a detailing on the elbow here where there's a sort of bracelet cuff thing.
Okay.
And it's specific to this elbow.
Yeah.
It's not on the other arm. And we didn't include it originally because it felt like an incidental detail. And it was like, no, this is very important.
Yeah.
That it's part of the visual identity of the model. So very happily able to go and put that in, and that's so important to us because what we're bringing to this is the understanding of the process of how these things are going to work, not just in a plastic but also shrunk down to this scale. And what our friends at FromSoft are bringing is an understanding of what elements are to them are essential to the artistic integrity of the world.
Now, talking about the Tarnished up
Sure.
here, when you start looking at the character creation in this game, it's almost uncapturable. Like,
sure.
Who would have imagined, a single individual with a pot on his head, naked, would take the internet by storm?
Yeah.
Right. Or you can literally wear the skin of a god. You can dress as a samurai. You can be an incredible archer. All of our starting poses here are going to be like that character creation scene, right?
Absolutely.
So that to me seems a bit more approachable, a bit easier. It's where your characters are beginning.
Sure.
How do you start making decisions around what models then become as the game progresses? Because you can't give everyone every option.
You really
can't.
can't.
Is it the most popular builds? Is it iconic things that the internet has chosen? Like, are you scrounging through Reddit to see what they voted on?
All of those things can inform those decisions, actually. But ultimately, what this came down to for this decision was, as you've identified, what appears on the initial selection screen is going to be the most iconic.
Yeah.
The most broadly iconic moment is you're always thinking, I'm sure some of the dev team have talked about the idea of what's the emotional DNA of the game. First impressions matter.
Yeah.
Your first experience in the game sets a certain set of expectations. So creating characters that felt that they were in their starting initial state gives you that most broadly iconic feel.
But then as we carry through, what's happening?
Well, that's where posing becomes important. So as an example, we don't have the model here, unfortunately. But as an example, the samurai, we had a dialogue with FromSoft, and we chose a sort of half-draw, like sword/slash stance, because it's iconic in and of itself, but it's also, it is a visual nod towards the Ashes of War that you would use on a bleed build.
Yep.
And Samurai Bleed is, it's how I played the game.
It's that or Magic. If you want a maybe approachable version of Elden Ring, you've got two pathways to take.
Exactly. And there are, all of the Magic casters were built around screenshots of them casting specific spells. Now, obviously, we can't represent the spell pyrotechnics on the model, but the posing was like, this casting pose from this spell is
and so fans will be able to identify.
Yeah, if you know the game,
what this build
you'll know
is
what's going on.
What they're actually.
Absolutely.
That's cool.
I mean, but the flexibility of the game in terms of upgrading means we can't represent that in the miniature. It's not possible. So we have to make that hard decision of where do you look, and where you look is that opening screen where you're creating your character establishes the fantasy for each of those classes.
Now, talking about scale and talking about how we make a determination around what is actually doable, what is shippable to people, versus what is realistic in the game and still gives you the impression of grandeur.
Yep.
Because a video game has no hold on scale.
It doesn't,
right?
no.
You come into the landscape with all the giants walking around, and they can be as big as a tower. And coming over here to something like this dragon, which I think is the first dragon you actually
encounter
in the game.
Spoiler notes. That dragon is the size it is because that's as big as it fits on the 3D printer. The actual production model is about 15% bigger.
No, yeah?
Yeah, it should be on a 140mm base. It's huge.
Okay, so that's where I was going, is like some of these feel a little bit more accurate in terms of scale. Like they feel right when it comes over here to the Tarnished.
Sure.
The Dragon's maybe the first one that I look at and I'm like, you had to make a choice around what is ridiculous and what is still feels accurate to the fear or the intimidation of this thing rising up.
Yeah, so there are a couple of places where we can make decisions there. And side note, this is a great example where this pose was for FromSoft more important to capture the iconic feel of the dragon than they were prepared for us to have to make the dragon smaller to capture this pose. In the end, what we've done is capture that pose and then just make an entirely bigger dragon anyway.
Fair enough.
Because we wanted to really capture it.
I don't think anyone's going to be upset about that.
No.
I mean, the pose just fits. You don't need those wings outstretched. You don't need this is what, when you're dying for the 13th time, this is what you're looking at.
But it's that, and it's that, I think, again, talking about at first impressions, it's when that dragon first lands in the swamp and it's leaning forward. Yeah. And and it's capturing that. So the things that we can play around with for scale are, we can just make models bigger. But as you say, there is a hard limit. We actually played with multiple scales of Tarnished because, we could make everything feel bigger by making them smaller.
Sure.
In the end, we feel like, and we've played around with this on a number of games, we feel like that this is a happy medium where the scale is representative for all but the very, very largest of models. We work quite a lot on nailing the scale. So Godric soldiers, Godric knights, wolves, bears, those all feel pretty perfectly accurate to the Tarnished. And then it drifts off a little more the larger the monsters get, but I think that it's enough to create the impact. So it's more about, again, it's an emotional reality rather than a strict interpretation, which is the same for anything when you're doing an adaptation.
What's been the hardest part about working on Elden Ring so far? I mean, you have all the experience from all the the Steamforged games you've done and from the Dark Souls that you sculpted all yourself. What's been the most difficult part about approaching this title?
It's a slightly self-imposed difficulty, but like in terms of the molding tech and what we can do in plastics compared to 6-7 years ago when we were designing Dark Souls, like the fidelity of what can be achieved in a board game miniature is so much higher now that for us that creates a quality bar that is considerably higher, and meeting that bar is an internal challenge but it's also a commitment and a promise we're making to FromSoft and to the fans of the game. And everyone on my team has played through the entirety of the game, and the case of a couple of players many times.
I haven't had the time yet.
I'm not great at it.
I'm hours upon hours into it, and yet I still feel like I have not touched Elden Ring.
Well, I'm very lucky because my brother, who is actually on the sculpting team, is a bit of a video game savant.
For some reason, I do this for a living.
So yeah, I had my brother as my secret weapon to get me through all the hard fights.
Nice.
But we all knew the IP really well. We're all really passionate about it, and I think that the decision to make, it's not a small undertaking to say to yourselves, we're going to make the best possible miniatures. Again, and here, the design that FromSoft have delivered, we've got leather, we've got armor, we've got rotting skin, we've got dragon skin, we've got horn, we've got so many different materials just on one miniature here in the form of Godric. It's all got to be rendered out in the plastic, and it's all got to feel visually recognizable, accurate, distinct. It's a massive challenge to land that level of fidelity, and I'm really proud that I feel like we've really done it, and I'm very, very happy with the work. And obviously FromSoft are hugely protective of the IP, hugely protective of the world that they've built, and we're coming into this campaign and they're completely happy with everything that we've done. So from that perspective, it's been a huge success.
Now, we know that one of the things that Steamforged Games loves to do is give the audience some degree of control as to what happens. It's one of the reasons why they keep going back to crowdfunding platforms, and they're one of the companies that do actually give pathways and build progression and choice, right? And things get locked out and things get opened up, and then they go back through and they develop and they sculpt afterwards, and they keep building. So, since you're also a fan and not just part of the team, selfishly, what do you wish in this first set? What do you wish we were able to mix in or include?
So what like a model that we didn't do that I'd like to have done?
Yeah, even if it's just a version of a tarnished or something like that.
That is such an interesting question that I genuinely hadn't considered. Do you know, it would have almost no gameplay value at all. I love it. But I was a big fan of the all turtles are actually dogs meme. So I would totally put a turtle in and have the legend for where you leave a note in the game that says dog on the base. That would have been for me all the way.
I think the community can make that happen. I'm just saying. There's an argument on behalf of it.
I can neither confirm nor deny that I would be willing to sculpt that in a heartbeat.
Perfect. So we need a turtle that says dog, and that's a great call to the way that the community actually interacts with and creates their own narrative around the Soulsborne trilogies.
I mean, one of the things that has been really it's been a genuinely difficult conversation is the difference between all of the characters, NPCs, and models that you could produce versus not releasing a game that costs $6,000 to buy. There are so many characters that are instantly recognizable and instantly engaging. Like there is a list of NPCs as long as my arm that I would love to have been able to have included. So yeah, don't ever give me the opportunity to start adding models to games because I won't know when to stop.
Seems reasonable. I mean, I guess the question I have for the audience too would be, leave a comment down below or vote up other people's comments about the random little pieces of lore or internet memology that has been created around Elden Ring and what you would like to see included, because Steamforged will be paying attention to the community.
Absolutely.
And we'll probably be paying attention to some of the comments down below as well. So if we get enough engagement, they might give you the option. And then if you get enough votes on the campaign, we might actually have a turtle with a nameplate that says dog. And I would feel responsible for that, which would be amazing. Outside of that, any other broad scope things or things that you think is valuable for the community to know? Because I come from a perspective, again, where I sat on a cool miniature, but I don't understand really the process to get there. Anything that we haven't gone over that you think's just like cool, weird, nerdy, behind the scenes stuff?
I don't know really. I mean, I think people may be surprised at how many steps there are in the process of producing a miniature, because when it arrives with yourselves, it's a settled thing that you put on the table, and you go, oh, that's cool, and then you play a game and maybe you don't think about it. But let's use Godric's journey as an example. Like, producing the initial version of the model was about 5 weeks work for one person. Then the feedback round backs probably adds another 3 weeks of work on top of that, and then at that point, we're at the point we are now, just to get this prototype that we're testing is about a 30 to 35 hour print.
Yeah.
Now, when this model goes over into our engineering process, that's going to be multiple weeks of work and round. And by the time that miniature lands in a box on your shelf, there's probably been through the hands of maybe 6 to 10 different artists and engineers, and it's probably had 10 to 15 weeks of work put into just that one miniature. It's
all for me to poorly paint it and throw it around my table.
But here's the thing, like, I love seeing painted miniatures. People ask me, as a sculptor, does it
ruin it for you?
Does it upset me if I see a badly painted miniature? I'm like, no, because for a start, that's not my miniature. That's your miniature.
Sure.
And that's your emotional engagement. That's your journey. You're making it your own. The fact that I've inspired somebody enough to put hours of their time into painting it, I have no to me, it's no different if somebody is...
Someone's not covering up your art.
Right. They're enhancing it. They're making it their own. There's that whole thing about, like, authors always say, like, a book isn't finished until someone reads it and brings their own meaning. It's the same kind of thing. These are...
Unless it's the wrong meaning.
But for me, these are pieces. They're to be played with. They're to be enjoyed.
Yeah.
And I'm just happy to be able to do that. And, like, it really excites me that people can sort of engage emotionally with them. And
now, after this is all over, do you get a shelf at your house with, like, some of these resins just sitting on it?
I tell you, it's got ridiculous. Like, I'm running out of room.
Yeah.
I have the coolest dust traps in the world, but
I want to visit your house so bad.
It's getting kind of wild.
Because I think I have a cool collection just from people, like, abandoning prototypes at my house.
Sure,
that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Surprisingly more than you'd assume. Like, we'll message, we'll be like, hey, it's been 6 months, we still don't know where to send this. We'll say, like, they'll be like, don't worry about it. Prototype, like, game's been funded where we've already have production on the way. We don't need it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, cool. And then I don't like throwing the models away because I come from a background of like collecting resin minis and like art minis from Kingdom Death and everything. And so I just have a glass shelf that I've started filling up with all these, like, lovable resins that I just I cannot bring myself to abandon.
I fully
them.
get that, and similar for me, but even more so because if we've done a tarnished in a pose,
Different pose,
and then we change it back, but we've prototype printed to check something. I might have the only version of that in the world.
So cool.
So yeah, I can't get rid of anything.
I can appreciate just how awesome that is. Yeah. Sometime I'll have to come through and, like, do a walkthrough of your studio and just talk about all
absolutely.
those different
I might have
pieces.
to tidy up a bit first, but yeah.
Oh, we all do, though. We're all board gamers. Don't worry. Cool. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the conversation.
Anytime. It's been fantastic.
I'm glad I've been able to give some people a little bit of a behind the scenes. Sorry that I don't know as much as maybe I should, but I'm like you. I'm an audience member who had an opportunity to sit down and have a cool conversation about a side of the industry that really we don't hear a lot about at the moment.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm always one of those people where if I see how a magic trick's done, I like it more, not less, because I appreciate the intelligence and the cleverness of
just
the decision making.
Timetable on something like that you went through for the production of one of these doesn't sink in.
No,
because to me, I think you can, like, grab the digital still, and I know it's not this simple, but to me, I think you can grab the digital still and just, like, hit print.
Yeah, 3D photocopy. It's not quite so simple, but it's a fantastic process, and it's its own unique challenge because you're not trying to create something that's new and fresh. You're trying to, you're trying to capture an emotional reaction to something that people know really well, and it's a great process, and I hope that seeing a little bit behind the scenes and behind the thinking that goes into it just helps people appreciate what they've got a little bit more and can enjoy it a little bit more as a result and feel a bit more connected to it. That would be fantastic.
Cool. Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you, and thanks for watching
and having a conversation. and enjoy the heck out of Elden Ring. I know you all are just here because you're overhyped at this point, appropriately so. I get to play in like an hour, so I can't wait.
I played last night. It was amazing.
Bye.